Galw'r cynulliad cenedlaethol I drefn. Yr eitem gyntaf yn agenda ni y prynawn yma yw'r cwestiynau i'r Prif Weinidog. A'r cwestiwn cyntaf, Jenny Rathbone.
Please can the First Minister provide an update on the funding needed for the South Wales Metro?
Yes, the Metro Phase 2 project has been estimated at £734 million. And the final cost will be determined during procurement negotiations. And funding, of course, includes match funding from the ERDF that we expect the UK Government to guarantee.
Given that even Alan Cairns now seems to be enthusiast for the South Wales Metros and has recognised the strategic importance of it for providing jobs and growth for the whole of the South East Wales area, are you confident that the UK government will give us the money that we need to ensure that we can deliver this project on time and to the quality required?
Well, given the Secretary of State for Wales's enthusiasm for the Metro, I would expect him to be able to demonstrate enough influence amongst his Westminster colleagues in order to deliver the £125 million worth of funding that we will lose as a result of the loss of European funding.
Neil McAvoy.
Diolch, Llywyd. I think enthusiasm is one thing really, but if the full funding of the South Wales Metro isn't guaranteed, nailed on guaranteed, what's the plan B?
Well, quite simply, the Metro won't be able to proceed at the same pace and with the same ambition as would otherwise be the case. There will still be a Metro, but obviously if there's £125 million less money involved, then the reach of the Metro and the speed of its expansion will be less. But given the fact that we have heard from those who wish to leave the European Union that every single penny of European funding would be guaranteed, we expect that promise to be honoured.
Russell George.
First Minister, I wonder if you could outline what discussions you've had with the UK government specifically, directly with them in regards to the project going forward.
With regards to?
In regards to the project going forward.
Well, as we've said many times to them, we expect to see the money to be there. If the money is lost through the loss of European funding, at an official level, there's very, very regular contact in terms of how we move forward, especially given the fact that so many of the levers that are required to deliver the Metro are not devolved. So there's a great deal of official-to-official contact that takes place on a regular basis.
David Rowlands.
A simple question, First Minister. When will the construction phase actually begin?
Well, of course, at the moment, we are going through the bidding process. And less said about it, the better, given the fact it has to go through a proper process. Once that bidding process is actually finalised, then we expect to see Phase 2 begin in the... well, much of it depends, of course, on the franchising in terms of the Wales and Borders franchise, but as soon as possible after the bidding process has been completed.
Question 2, Angela Burns.
Thank you, thank you, Presiding Officer. Will the First Minister provide an update on the legislative programme for the Fifth Assembly?
Yes. I announced the first annual legislative programme of this Fifth Assembly on the 28th of June.
Thank you for that, First Minister. I wondered when you might expect to see the main policy thrusts of any new legislation that is passed during the Fifth Assembly being implemented. How long would you expect it to take from royal assent to a policy thrust actually being implemented and being delivered on the ground? Background to this, of course, is the autism debate last week, when much was made of the Social Services and Wellbeing Bill that was passed with royal assent in April 2014, and yet we're still waiting for policy outcomes from that. So it's a matter of curiosity. Thank you.
Well, much of it depends on the legislation itself. What I can say to the member is the Minister has agreed that officials will meet with the National Autistic Society to discuss the Society's draft bill. That meeting has been arranged for the 14th of November. I am confident, however, that we have the legislative and policy levers to continue to improve the lives of people with autism and their families and carers, of course. A refreshed Autistic Spectrum Disorder Action Plan will be published next month. That will be accompanied by a delivery plan with measurable outcomes, and we have recently consulted on the draft action plan, which addresses priorities for stakeholders. So yes, that legislation is still moving forward, but nevertheless, as was said last week, we will monitor the situation, we'll work with the National Autistic Society, and we'll keep the door open for legislation should it be required.
David Rees.
First Minister, on the 20th of June, the country had only just decided to actually leave the EU. As a consequence of that, there could well be possible legislative implications upon here in Wales. What analysis is the Welsh Government doing to actually look at the implications upon the legislative programme that you are putting forward, based upon the fact that we could see a lot more legislation coming from Brussels as a consequence of that exit?
It's very difficult at this stage, of course, to examine what the situation might actually be, given the fact we await the judgment of the Supreme Court, potentially, in terms of the use of the royal prerogative and the effect that would have potentially on repealing statute law, which is not what the prerogative is designed to do. Until we see the outcome of that process and the outcome of the process over the next 2 years, it's difficult at this stage to know what effect there will be on individual items of legislation passed by the Assembly. Of course, what we expect will happen is that the opportunity will arise at some point to offer the Assembly the opportunity to decide whether it should be bound by EU law in the future. At the moment, of course, we can't pass any legislation that is in conflict or incompatible with European Union law. Clearly, that will change in the future.
Simon Thomas.
Diolch, Llywydd. Wel, wrth lawnsio eich faglen deddfwriaethol Prif Weinidog, oeddech chi'n sôn am 2 ddarn o deddfwriaeth oedd yn fater o drafodaeth rhwng ein 2 blaid nina, sef darn a deddf awtistiaeth, sydd eisiau wedi cael ei cybwyll, a'r deddf arall am wneud y dyddymir a'r amddiffyniad o cosb rhesymol, fel mae'n cael ei alw ar gyfer cosbi plant. Fedrwch chi gadarnhau yn ystod y cyfnod a tymor y cynulliad hwn, bod chi'n dal fel Prif Weinidog am gyflwyno deddfwriaeth yn y 2 faes yma?
Yn ni ar ail item fanna, wrth gwrs, mae hwnna'n rhywbeth ni eisiau symud ymlaen gyda. Ar sylfaen trawsbleidiol, na fi wedi hynny, ond wedi gweud hwn o'r blaen. Yn ni ar sefyllfa ynglyn â awtistiaeth, ga i ddweud wrtho fe beth nath ddwy blaid i gytuno nôl ym mis Mehefin, sef a wedi fe'n Saesneg, achos yn Saesneg gath e gytuno. Agreed we'd work together through the liaison committee to consider how best to deliver separate legislation on autism, in due course to place the Autism Spectrum Disorder Strategic Action Plan on a statutory footing. This work will need to take into account the impact of the new All-Age Autism Service, refreshed Autistic Spectrum Disorder Strategic Action Plan and the implementation of the Social Services and Wellbeing Wales Act 2040. Felly, cadarnhau beth wedes I a cadarnhau beth wedi cael ei gytuno rhwng y 2 blaid.
Galw nawr ar gwestiynau gan arweinwyr y pleidiau i'r Prif Weinidog ac yn gyntaf wythnos yma arweinydd grŵp UKIP, Neil Hamilton.
Diolch, Llywydd. As the First Minister will know, Wales has the lowest number of GPs per 1,000 patients of any part of the UK, the number being 0.6 GPs per 1,000 in 2014. He'll know also that training places are currently not being filled, that increasing numbers of GPs are retiring early, and there's a growing crisis in recruitment and retention. Can he tell the Assembly what plans the government has, with a concrete timeline, to train a greater proportion of UK doctors in Wales?
Well, it's not realistic to think that we will be able to train every doctor that practices in Wales. 5% of our medical staff are made up of doctors who are trained elsewhere in the EU. A substantial number are made up of doctors who are trained elsewhere. That is true of every NHS, every health service everywhere in the developed world. That said, we want to make sure that we train more doctors. That much is true. I do not accept what he says, that there is a crisis in GP recruitment. There are challenges. That's correct, but those challenges are not restricted to Wales. He asked, what are we doing about it? On the 20th of October, we will, of course, be launching our GP recruitment campaign in order to make sure that we attract more students and, indeed, practitioners to Wales.
I thank the First Minister for his reply. As you will know, since 2004, the percentage of NH funding in Wales which has been spent on GPs has gone down from over 10% to just over 7.5%. In the same time, consultation rates have increased by more than 20%, so GPs are being more hard-pressed in their daily work. Does he agree with me that the independent contractor model for GPs is the one which offers best value for money for the NHS overall? And that, does he realise that for every half hour of patient contact that GPs do, they have another half hour in patient-centred work and another half hour again on top of that in administration? And if that were to be done as employed persons, employed by local health boards, we would likely get less bang for every buck that we spend.
Well, there are 2 points there. First of all, there are more GPs now than there were a decade ago. That's worth emphasising. And also, we should be wary of referring people constantly or pushing people in the direction constantly of GPs. We, through our Choose Well campaign, are looking to advise people that for many conditions they should go to a pharmacist first, a practice nurse first, rather than going straight to a GP by default and increasing that GP's workload. It's a matter for GPs as to the way they organise themselves. It is true, however, that more and more newly qualified GPs are not attracted by the independent contractor model. They must have the choice as to whether to be salaried GPs or independent contractors. It's a matter for the profession how it organises itself, but I don't hold to the view that the independent contractor model is necessarily the only model that can be adhered to in the future. It'll be, the model will vary according to the preferences of those who deliver the service.
I agree with some of what the First Minister said, but I'd like to reiterate some of the points which have already been made by other questioners today in relation to the autism bill. Does he understand the widespread anger and indeed incomprehension amongst the public at large that Labour AMs were whipped last week to vote against the motion for an autism bill, which wasn't actually a legislative proposal in itself, but an expression of opinion of this Assembly on a matter which goes to the very heart of the suffering of tens and tens of thousands of people in Wales? Yeah.
In Haverfordwest on Thursday, I was asked this question by members of the public, and I understood their position. I understand the great pressure that autism places on families. I've dealt with autism through casework over many, many years and seen some very difficult cases indeed. What I asked them, though, is what a law would deliver for them, and they were unclear on that. Now, perhaps it was an unfair question to ask members of the public, but what's important is that we work with the National Autistic Society in order to identify with them what aspects of the draft bill actually can be delivered in other ways. Why wait years for a bill if there are better ways to deliver a better service now? From our perspective, a law is what is required when every other means of delivering a service has shown itself not to be effective. And so the Minister will work with the Society in order to make sure that we can deliver what we can with what we have already, and also examine whether there is a need for legislation in the future.
Arweinydd Plaid Cymru, Leanne Wood.
Diolch, Llywydd. 4 bidders have expressed an interest in running the Wales and the Borders franchise and the associated metro system. One area needing further scrutiny is the franchise map, or the actual routes which will be operated. We know that the UK Government's Department for Transport wanted to remove certain routes from the franchise, and in particular those routes which serve destinations in England. Your Cabinet Secretary has indicated that the UK Government wants the map broadly unchanged. Do the 4 bidders know which routes that they are bidding for? And can you tell us when passengers across Wales will be given sight of the next franchise map?
There are several issues that arise as a result of the franchise. First of all, at this moment in time, the Welsh Government, unlike the Scottish Government, is prevented from running a franchise and having that franchise run by a public body or public agency for reasons that are not fathomable in logic, but that's what the current Wales bill actually says. We have made strong representations to the UK Government saying that if it's right for Scotland, therefore it's also right for Wales. As far as the franchise is concerned in terms of the destinations, our view is the franchise map should stay as it is. Otherwise, of course, there will be no service between Merthyr and the Conwy Valley Railway that is run by the Welsh Government or through the Welsh franchise. Every service along the North Wales main line will be run from England, except the Conwy Valley line wouldn't be. The Central Wales line, the Heart of Wales line, Cambrian coastline will all be run outside of the Welsh franchise. That is frankly a ludicrous situation and something that we are continuing to tell the UK Government in those exact terms.
The renewal of the franchise gives us an opportunity to address the issue of capacity, and there's a significant issue with capacity on the Valley lines. As you'll be aware, every day commuters face issues of overcrowding and delays. Frequency is an issue as well. On the Treherbert line, for example, one that I'm particularly familiar with, there are only 2 passing points on that line, and we need to go from a single line to a dual line. Now, in the budget today, there's capacity, the Treherbert line is mentioned in the budget. Can you say more about that train line? And in particular, can you tell us when we can expect to see a plan for the redualling of the Treherbert train line, please?
Well, first of all, it's absolutely right that we want to see better frequency, better services, a better quality rolling stock on all the Valley lines. None of those criteria are satisfied at the moment. Proper signalling, of course, on the lines to make sure that more trains can run on those lines and possibly more passing loops. Now, the question as to whether the entire line should be redualed and whether that would actually add anything beyond improvements short of that is an open question. But one thing I can say to the Leader of Plaid Cymru is we are absolutely committed via the metro system to deliver better frequency and better trains for the people of the Rhondda Fawr and all the Valley lines.
I welcome that statement, First Minister, because when the franchise was last awarded, there was no provision for a growth in passenger numbers, and there was no capacity within that franchise to increase the rolling stock. So I wonder if you can explain to us how you will make sure that that point is addressed in the next franchise. People travelling on those valley lines are sick and tired of travelling on decades-old second-hand rolling stock. When you travel elsewhere, there are excellent trains. Do you think train travellers in Wales deserve the service that we currently have to put up with?
No, it should be far better. We have seen some improvements around Queen Street and the points of access to Queen Street station, but I know full well that the quality of the trains is poor. They lack air conditioning. They're not pleasant trains to travel on. The frequency is not good. The capacity is not good. And people often have to suffer overcrowding to the extent where some trains have to pass through some stations in order to avoid the overcrowding. These will be addressed as a result of the franchise negotiations. The franchise will transfer in the autumn of next year, but we're absolutely determined to make sure that there's better capacity, better trains, better frequency on all the Valley Line services. It's an intrinsic part of the Metro to make sure that people enjoy a far better service than they enjoy now.
Arweinydd y Ceidwadwyr Cymraeg, Andrew R.T. Davies.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, there was a report out last week that highlighted the extra cost that your childcare policy could potentially end up costing the Welsh Government at the end of the 5-year assembly. A potential deficit of about 120 million over what you costed for your manifesto. Do you recognise the figures within that report? And if you do recognise the figures in that report, how are you making the allowances to be able to meet that increased demand that we all recognise childcare is an important part of the balance that many families face on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I mean, there were some assumptions in that report about how we would implement the childcare policy, but the figures that we came out with are based on providing childcare for those who are working 16 hours a week or more, and they were figures that were provided to us by an independent survey and not by ourselves.
But I do take it that from your answer you do accept that there's a potential for this massive overspend, especially if the scheme is hopefully a rip-roaring success, in fairness, First Minister, because as I said, all parties recognised going into the election that childcare was a huge issue. Now your offer is the offer that will be implemented because you're in government, and there is this potential of an overspend of £110 million. Now that's not small change in the money that you have available as a government. Now, what allowances are you making to make sure that resources are available so that the scheme can be implemented and its full capacity and potential reached at the end of this assembly?
We don't accept those figures are correct. We are confident in the figures that we have. We believe that they are robust. They were figures that were provided to us as a result of work that we commissioned, and those figures we believe are correct in terms of the money that will be needed to implement the policy.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. So you do take it then that those figures aren't correct and that your figures of £90 million are the costings of that scheme. But if you look at your wider commitments in the first 5 years, first 5 months, should I say, of this Assembly, you have the backing of the Black Route, which is the most expensive M4 relief option. You have the pupil premium agreed with the Education Secretary. You have the potential for an overspend in your childcare policy. We know from the report last week that there is a deficit opening up in NHS funding to the potential tune of £700 million. In fairness to you, when you were on the campaign trail, you said that for every commitment there will have to be a cut. Where will the cuts fall within your programme to deliver on those commitments that I've just outlined?
Well, I mean, that will become apparent during the course of the draft budget statement. On the M4 relief road, that of course will be financed through borrowing and not through our own capital budgets. We are more than content with the figures that we provided back in May, that they will help us to deliver the manifesto promises that we made. And indeed, that's exactly what we did in 2011. We kept the promises then, and we'll keep those promises in 2016.
Cwestiwn 3, Hannah Blythen.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the importance of investment in tourism in North Wales?
Yes, our tourism strategy sets out our priorities in supporting the tourism industry, including capital and development funding, along with marketing and promotional activities.
Thank you. On Friday, I was at a well-attended meeting of the Flintshire Tourism Association discussing the value of the visitor economy to North East Wales. I welcome the Welsh Labour Manifesto commitment and the Cabinet Secretary's plans to create a culture corridor across the A55, which includes new signage to market our amazing heritage and tourist assets in the region. And First Minister, do you agree with the value of this? And can you give an update on the progress of the enhanced signage?
Yes, I can say that Visit Wales is currently developing proposals for new tourism routes across Wales, including a project to do more to promote culture and heritage attractions along the A55, in order, of course, for people to spend more time in the area. There are many of us in this chamber who will have heard from people who have said, yes, I've travelled along the A55 on the way to Ireland, but haven't stopped. We need more of those people to stop, and, of course, more people to make the north of Wales their destination in the first place.
Mark Isherwood.
Well, tourism sector representatives in Flintshire and across North Wales have told me the Welsh Government needs to respond to the £40 million provided by Visit England for tourism marketing there, and to acknowledge how it proposes to address the fund there already being distributed. How, therefore, do you respond to their concern that Wales needs to be aware of the increased resources close to our borders, such as Chester, Cheshire, Shropshire, Bristol and Bath, with the potential to encourage English staycation and divert English and overseas visitors from Wales?
We're well aware of it, but of course our tourism statistics show that more people are visiting Wales, and particularly more people are visiting Wales from abroad. That's been quite significant over the past year. We market Wales on the basis of themed years, and so this year is the year of adventure. We know that the sector is worth £481 million to the Welsh economy, and of course the North will play a very important part in the year of adventure plans, and we've been working very closely with businesses in order for that to happen. So whilst of course we keep an eye on our competitors, we know through the figures that we have for tourism that Wales has been successful in attracting more and more visitors.
Llyr Griffith.
Diolch Llywydd. Wrth gwrs, un o'r blaenoriaethau nawr yw estyn y tymor twristiaeth fel bod modd cynnig swyddi bobl Gogledd Cymru drwy gydol y flwyddyn. Allwch chi ddweithio ni falle beth mae'ch llywodraeth chi yn i'w wneud i geisio cyflawni hynny, a sut falle bysach chi'n defnyddio unrhyw adnoddau ychwanegol y gellid i dyrannu at twristiaeth i gyflawni hynny?
Ie, mae'n rhaid cael gweithgareddiaeth wrth gwrs sydd ar gael trwy'r flwyddyn. Surf Snowdonia, ni'n enghraifft ni wedi cefnogi. Zipwyl a Bounce hefyd, ni wedi cefnogi Rhena. Mae'n wir i weid, wrth gwrs, bod yn bwysig dros ben, bod twristiaeth ddim yn rhywbeth sy'n hollol dymhorol. O achos y ffaith wedyn, wrth gwrs, bod yn creu sefyllfa lle dyw bobl ddim yn cael cyflog trwy'r flwyddyn. So, trwy helpu busnesau a chefnogi busnesau fel hynny, mae'n bosib wedyn, wrth gwrs, i sicrhau bod gweithgareddau ar gael ar draws y flwyddyn, mwyn tynnu bobl mewn yn y gia a hefyd yr haf.
Michelle Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, could we have some more detail on how the Welsh Government proposes to market North Wales as a holiday destination, please?
Well, we have the Tourism Investment Support Scheme. It's made offers of funding to 42 businesses in the north, totalling £7.8 million. It's created 361 jobs and safeguarded another 113. We have as well the Tourism Attractor Destination Programme, working on 4 business plans for the north. If you look at Wales, what we've spent over the years, if you look at Colwyn Bay, the work that's been done there, not just Parc Aires, but also the seafront in Colwyn Bay, the substantial investment that's been put into Rhyl over the years, over £30 million in improving the Rhyl seafront. We have the Regional Tourism Engagement Fund, that's been worth £280,000 to the north, the Tourism Product Innovation Fund as well. And of course, we have invested over £1.7 million in major events, and they include events such as the Slate Man and Sandman Triathlons, the Llangollen Fringe Festival, Festival number 6, the Tour of Britain, Wales Rally GB, just to name a few.
Cwestiwn 4, Dai Lloyd.
Diolch yn fawr, Llywydd. Am wnaeth y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad am y galw ar wasanaethau gofal sylfaenol?
Wel, i weld cynnydd, wrth gwrs, yn y galw am wasanaethau gofal sylfaenol, ni'n lansio ymgyrch farchnata genedlaethol a rhyngwladol i annog rhagor o ymarferwyr cyffredinol i weithio yng Nghymru. A mae yna 42 miliwn o bunnoedd wedi cael roi i fyrddau iaith mwyn cefnogi gweithredu ein cynlluniau.
Diolch yn fawr am yr ateb yna, Prif Weinidog. Nawr, oedd nifer ohonon ni mewn cyfarfod o'r BMA yma wythnos dwytha, oedd yn lawnsio rhagnodiad bris ar olwg o fyddegaeth teulu yn 2016 a darlun o hynna o'r pwysau anferthol sydd ar feddygon teulu. O gofio bod yna meddyg teulu yn gweld tua hanner cant o gleifion bob dydd ar gyfer taledd, a hynna i gyd yn cynnwys problemau cymleth dyrys, dwys, achos mae'r problemau syml eisoes wedi cael ei didoli allan y dyddi yma, a dim ond y problemau dwys sydd ar ôl i'r meddyg teulu gael ei gweld. Ac wrth gwrs, dim ond y sefyllfaoedd sydd angen meddyg teulu di hynna. Felly dyna pan mae'r pwysau anferthol. Mae yna hanner cant o gleifion cymleth sydd dim ond yn gallu cael ei gweld gan feddyg teulu. Beth allwch chi wneud i leihau y pwysau anferthol na ar feddygon teulu nawr y dyddi yma?
Wel, mae'r BMA yn rhan o'r gwaith ni'n wneud. Dyn ddim tu fas i hynny. Wrth gwrs, maen nhw'n cynrychioli i aelodau wy'n deall hynny. Ond ni wedi bod yn gweithio gyda nhw mwyn sicrhau bod yna leihad ar y pwysau sydd ar y feddygon teulu. Un enghraifft, wrth gwrs, yw'r collaboratif yn y canolbarth sydd yn gweithio'n galed mwyn sicrhau bod gwasanaethau ar gael i bobl yn y canolbarth a ystyried ffyrdd newydd o weithio. Yn y pen draw, wrth gwrs, ni moyn gweld mwy o feddygon teulu yn cael eu hyfforddi yng Nghymru a hefyd gweithio yng Nghymru, a dyma pam, wrth gwrs, mae'r ymgyrch yn cael ei lansio yn 2 ddiwrnod.
Vicky Howells.
Diolch, Llywydd. It is important that we provide primary care facilities that are fit for purpose and that meet demand. Cwmtaff University Health Board and RCT Council are collaborating to develop a new health centre in Mountain Ash that will do exactly this. How is the Welsh Government working with partners to improve primary care facilities across Wales?
Well, I know that the Health Board has established a project board to develop a proposal for the new primary care facility in Mountain Ash. And we look to work with all the health boards to deliver those kinds of facilities. I've seen them being opened all across Wales, modern facilities where practices can keep their identities within those buildings, but nevertheless have access to support services and modern facilities. And we'll keep on working with GPs and with health boards to deliver more up-to-date modern health centres in the future.
Susie Davis.
Diolch, Llywydd. Keeping people out of hospital is placing demand on primary care services which are already stretched. People in need of social care are more likely to call on primary and probably reablement care than the general population. Social care isn't all about the GP, though, and I'm wondering how the Welsh Government is securing the support of non-medical intervention to support the confidence and emotional well-being of people in social care, and how you then measure the drop in demand on primary care services, especially primary mental health care services.
Well, we know how important it is to have support services for people when they're outside hospital, and that means ensuring that we don't cut spending in social services, as has happened, of course, over the border. In Wales, spending on health and social services is 7% higher per head than it is in England, because you cannot divorce the two. You cannot raid social services budgets in order to pay for health. The two of them run together, and that's why we've protected budgets in Wales and will continue to do so.
Caroline Jones.
First Minister, Wales has a growing and ageing population which is putting increased pressures on primary care services in Wales. As those of us who signed the urgent prescription for general practice can attest to, workload pressures upon GPs is undermining the safety of patient care. Will the Welsh Government support the BMA request for local health boards to stop the practice of requiring GPs to deliver tests organised in other parts of the NHS, and for the introduction of a national standard for a minimum number of patients a GP can be expected to deal with during a working day?
Well, I have to say to the member, it is not normally the case where GPs deliver tests on behalf of other parts of the health service, they're paid to do it. They don't do it for nothing. And as a result of that, it's not a case, therefore, that they find that their time is not compensated in that regard. I have to say, for example, on top of what I've just said, that this year we've seen the recruitment of over 400 additional staff across Wales, including clinical pharmacists, including physios and care coordinators, and they help to support GPs as part of a GP-led multi-professional approach. If we look at Prestatyn, for example, we see a great example there of a service that's much improved for people, taken over by the Health Board, where a number of practitioners are available for people and they can be diverted to the right practitioner when they arrive at the premises. And that is a good model that we need to investigate for the rest of Wales.
Question 5, Mark Reckless.
What will be the cost of giving means-tested grants to newly eligible students from households earning between £50,020 and £81,000 a year?
Well, the member is jumping the gun a little because, of course, the government has not yet provided a full response to the Diamond Review, and that response, of course, is is being considered and will be announced in due course.
Well, if the government's mind is still open on this matter, will the First Minister note that university participation at this income level is already high? Mark Drakeford will be setting out later the financial pressures Welsh Government faces. And just in response to my party colleagues earlier, you said you were unable even to estimate a start date for construction on the Metro, and you heard that we had the lowest GP numbers of any of the nations and regions in the UK. In light of that, will the First Minister consider whether providing means-tested grants to this group really is that priority?
I'm not sure that GPs in the Metro are connected, but in regard to the Metro, that's because, of course, the franchise will not be transferred until the autumn of next year, so it's difficult to give a start date for Phase 2. Phase 1 has started, of course, of the Metro. Phase 1 has started already. That started last year. It's to do with Phase 2 and the way the franchise will be, and the agreement on the franchise and the map that will be important in terms of determining when the next phase of the Metro will begin. The Cabinet Secretary for Education has indicated the broad principles that we'll be following in response to the Diamond Review, and we'll seek to get the most equitable solution for all of our students.
Llyr Griffith.
Diolch Llywydd. Wrth gwrs, wrth i ni symud o'r model sydd wedi cael ei ddisgrifio fodel anghynaladwy presennol i'r fodel fydd mae rhywun yn tybio'n seiliedig ar Diamond, allwch chi gadarnhau os ydw i yn fwriad gan y Llywodraeth chi i geisio gwireddu unrhyw arbedion ariannol?
Wel, ni moyn wrth gwrs sicrhau bod system mewn lle sydd yn deg, sydd yn defnyddio'r cyllid sydd yna, wrth gwrs, ac wrth gwrs sydd yn dilyn yr egwyddorion wedi dod i lawr yn barod, sef bod ni'n cadw yr egwyddor bod pawb yn rhan o'r system, sicrhau bod na ffordd sydd yn deg a hefyd sydd yn gyson ynglyn â delio gyda myfyrwyr os yn rhan amser neu llawn amser, sicrhau wrth gwrs bod na fuddsoddiad gan yr unigolion ond hefyd gan Lywodraeth, a hefyd wrth gwrs sicrhau bod bobl yn gallu cael mwy o fynediad i addysg uwch. Dyna'r egwyddorion mae'r ysgrifennydd wedi datgan lan i nawr, a dyna'r egwyddorion bydd ni'n dilyn.
Darren Miller.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, you had an opportunity there in response to Llyr Griffith to recommit yourself to the commitment that both you and the Liberal Democrats reached when forming your coalition government, which was that there would be no negative effect on the higher education budget as a result of the implementation of any changes. Will you take the opportunity to make that commitment today? And do you acknowledge that Professor Diamond himself has suggested that there will be a 48.25 million worth of savings each year if these recommendations are implemented today? That's a significant saving. What are you going to do with that extra money?
We will look to invest in the institutions, in the universities, of course. It's not without strings. We want to make sure that our universities deliver, of course. So I don't want to give the impression that this is money that universities would get without an expectation that they continue to deliver better. But we want to make sure that investment continues to rise in our higher education institutions, while at the same time delivering a fair deal for students.
Cwestiwn 6, Rhina Biorwerth.
Diolch a wnaeth y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad am y camau gweithredu pan benderfynir na all cymuned gael ei chysylltu dan raglen cyflymu Cymru.
Wel, pan mae sefleoedd yn ymholi ar gaeledd cyflymu Cymru, a mae'n amlwg na fydd BT yn ddarparu iddyn nhw, mae'n bosib i nhw wedyn wrth gwrs i cael ei gynghori i ddilyn dewisiadau eraill drwy'r cynllun grant allwedd Band Eang Cymru. Mae Band Eang Cymru, wrth gwrs, mae Superfast Cymru, sef enghraifft, wedi cael ei adeiladu ar sylfaen o helpu cymunedau lle does dim modd masnachol i helpu nhw, ond mae yna ffyrdd eraill i helpu cymunedau sydd tu fas i'r ddwy categori hynny.
Diolch am yr ymateb yna. Mae eisiau dathlu wrth gwrs yr miloedd o gysylltiadau sydd wedi cael ei wneud dan raglen cyflymu Cymru, ond o dan y straeon positif yna, wrth gwrs mae yna gymunedau ar hyd a lled Cymru sy'n methu a chael cysylltiad. Allai sôn wrthych chi am ardal Bryn Siencyn, lle mae cwmni byd enwog Halen Môn yn dal yn methu cael band eang cyflym. Allai sôn wrthych chi am Landdona, lle mae 14 o deuluoedd yn desbret i gael band eang cyflym ac eisiau talu amdano fo ac yn methu cael. Y broblem ydy bod nhw'n methu a chael eglurhad o pam i bod nhw'n methu a chael cysylltiad. Ydy'r Prif Weinidog yn cysylltu efo fi y dyla dadansoddiad o gost yn erbyn bydd gael ei gyhoeddi gan Openreach fel bod pobl yn gyntaf yn gweld pam bod eu hardal nhw yn rhy ddrud i'w gysylltu ac yn ail fel arf mwyn chwilio am ffordd amgen i wneud y cysylltiad.
Mae'n bwysig bod BT yn gweud wrth cymunedau pam dyw ddim yn bosib I gysylltu nhw gyda band eang. Wrth gwrs, nod Cyflwynir Cymru yw nid edrych ar adi rhywbeth yn fasnachol I wneud, ond I sicrhau bod gwasanaeth ar gael. So felly, fi'n credu mae yna ddyletswydd ar Open Reach I ddweud pam mae fe'n ormod o broblem. Gweud hynny, wrth gwrs, fod sy'n gynharach. Mae fe'n bosib wrth gwrs I bobl I edrych ar cynlluniau fel allwedd band eang Cymru mwyn cael arian I helpu nhw I gael band eang yn y pen draw. Ond mae'n bwysig dros ben bod drysymau'n cael ei roi gan BT ynglŷn â pam mae yna broblemau lai nawr.
Paul Davies.
Diolch yn fawr. Prif Weinidog, mae mynediad at wasanaeth band eang digonol wedi bod yn fater enfawr hefyd I ni yn Sir Benfro. Wrth gwrs, dwi yn croesawu'r camau a gyhoeddodd y Gweinidog yr wythnos diwethaf I helpu'r cymunedau hynny sydd ddim yn gallu cael eu cysylltu o dan brosiect Superfast Cymru, a dwi'n deall y bydd yna weithgareddau ymgysylltu nawr yn digwydd. Yn yr amgylchiadau, allwch chi ddweud wrthyn ni siwt y bydd Llywodraeth Cymru yn hyrwyddo'r datblygiadau hyn ac yn benodol i'r rhai sy'n byw mewn cymunedau mwy gwledig ac yng Nghysbell I sicrhau fod pawb yn gwybod am hyn.
Wel, mae yna adolygiad arall mynd I Gymru lle yn ystod yr hydref mwyn gweld pa fath o lwybr sydd yn gael ni'n gyhoeddus mwyn helpu rhai o'r cymunedau sydd ddim wedi dod o dan o Cyflwynir Cymru. Ond maen nhw'n dal gallu wrth gwrs edrych ar cynlluniau fel allwedd band eang Cymru mwyn sicrhau bod yna fynediad I band eang ar gael iddyn nhw os dyn nhw ddim yn dod o dan Cyflwynir Cymru.
Nathan Gill.
Yeah, thank you, Clara. First Minister, we've pretty much moved on since the Superfast Cymru initiative was started. In fact, there are 3 other types of broadband, or fibre optic, and now I believe it's called hyperoptic broadband, which is 128 times faster than the super fast that we are fitting throughout Wales. And what we've got is an equivalent of a four-lane highway merging into a winding country lane. Because, of course, we've got the broadband all the way up to the boxes, and then we're using 128-year-old technology to connect the houses to it. So my question to you is, first of all, what are you going to do to ensure that new build premises actually have the fibre to the premises connections? And also, what are we able to do to allow houses that have broadband to the box at the end of the street, but actually have the fibre all the way to their homes as well, if that's what they require?
Well, interesting in the sense of, can we require developers to, either through the building regs or probably more likely through Section 106 agreements, to require developers to put in place state-of-the-art connections to the boxes. He's right. There is a mixture of technologies in place in terms of the British phone system, because it lacked investment for so many years. What we're trying to do with Superfast Cymru is to get most people to a position where they can download video, download music, listen, download documents in a reasonable amount of time. But it's true to say that it won't be the fastest in the world, given the fact we know there are faster systems elsewhere, but they'll require substantial investment. But he raises an interesting suggestion, though I wonder whether developers would have a different view as to whether we should require developers then to put in place the most up-to-date technology possible as a result when they get planning permission.
Cwestiwn 7, Bethan Jenkins.
The First Minister make a statement on the provision of art centres throughout Wales.
Yes, Wales benefits from a comprehensive network of art centres and venues that cover the length and breadth of the country.
Obviously, you will appreciate that across Wales, it's one of the first ways that people can access the arts in relation to small-scale art centres. Therefore, I was really concerned that East Talbot Council has decided to close Portadower Art Centre one day a week, the day of the week that community groups actually do use the centre. I was there recently to watch the Revlon Girls, which is a show I'm sure many of us have seen about the Aberfan disaster, and I'd be very concerned if the centre did close a day a week, because, of course, they have vital services to be providing, and once it's closing one day, it may be a slippery slope to closing more days of the week. So would you join with me in trying to seek assurances from East Talbot Council that they will not take this decision and that they will keep the centre open for business?
Well, ultimately, of course, it is a matter for the Council, but I hope that the draft budget will provide councils across Wales with a level of comfort so that they feel that they do not have to take decisions along the lines the members just described.
Jeremy Miles.
Thank you, First Minister, for your answer to Bethan Jenkins. May I acknowledge the value which Bethan has put on the role that Portadour Arts Centre plays in the community, and I myself was with Bethan watching the Revlon Girls there a few days ago. Would he also acknowledge that the role of... not exactly with, but would he also acknowledge the broader role that art centres play, not just as places of entertainment, important though that is, but as community hubs, providing, helping tackle isolation, offering a broader offering for school children in terms of education and general well-being? And would he join with me in hoping that local authorities across Wales will look at all those considerations when they're considering funding and support for the future?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the member makes a very good point about the educational purposes of art centres. We shouldn't forget either that art centres provide employment. Many years ago, I listened to a very powerful lecture given by Dr. Meredith Hopwood on culture as an economic driver in Northern Ireland, of all places, but it emphasised very strongly how the arts can actually be can be used as a way of developing local economies as well. So there are a number of areas where art centres are important that go beyond what is immediately obvious to members of the public.
Janet Finch-Saunders.
Llallawydd. First Minister, one way of protecting our community arts centres, of course, is a similar model to that in England of the Localism Act afforded in order to save community facilities. 78% of respondents to your protecting community assets were in favour of such rights. Now, over the past 18 months, you funded a community transfer support officer at a cost of £56,000 to the taxpayer. Could you advise the Chamber today of the meaningful outcomes of that post, how many community assets have been transferred as a result of that, and how you intend, as the First Minister of Wales, to drive that kind of agenda forward that helps us to protect our community assets?
Well, there are plenty of examples where communities have taken over facilities in Wales. Not long ago, I was in Britain Ferry Library, in fact, in David Rees's constituency, where the library had been taken over. But it's important to distinguish between helping local people to take over their facilities and forcing them to do so via the Localism Act. We prefer to take a voluntary approach, and we see good examples of that happening across Wales.
Cwestiwn 8, Rhiannon Passmore.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the difference of the pupil deprivation grant is making to the educational outcomes in Islwyn?
Well, we see that the impact of the grant is strong. It's making a real difference to the lives of disadvantaged learners, and we are starting to break the very stubborn link between poverty and educational achievement.
Thank you, First Minister. Statistics recently released show a further increase in the proportion of learners eligible for free school meals achieving 5 good GCSEs, including mathematics and English or Welsh first language. This represents the best performance yet by our disadvantaged learners, and for the second year, the attainment gap between children and young people receiving free school meals and their peers has closed. First Minister, this is further evidence of how successfully the Welsh Government is tackling poverty in Wales. Can you then tell me how the Welsh Government continues to build on this success?
Well, I know that the Cabinet Secretary has a very strong personal commitment to the Pupil Deprivation Grant. She's already announced a doubling of support from £300 to £600 through the Early Years Pupil Development Grant to eligible 3- and 4-year-olds in the foundation phase. And it's a clear demonstration of our long-term commitment to breaking the intergenerational cycle of poverty.
Cwestiwn 9, John Griffiths.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the evidence base and research that is underlying the Welsh Government's economic development strategy?
Well, we use evidence from a wide range of sources to shape our approach to delivering a fairer, more prosperous and more secure Wales.
First Minister, Professors Brian Morgan and Jerry Holtham recently carried out research on what works in economic development across the globe. They found a very strong correlation between high levels of spend on schools and economic success. As well as the economic advantages, of course, education is a good in itself and benefits all aspects of life. Will Welsh Government work to increase funding to our schools in Wales?
Well, we've done exactly that, of course, through the protections we've put in place for schools. We're seeing new schools being built across Wales. Something that didn't happen when I was in school in the 80s. Nothing was ever built in the 1980s. Things fell apart. And we see more and more of our school students in buildings that are appropriate for them. Members are absolutely right. Skills and infrastructure are the two areas that are most important to any modern economy. You must have the ability to move goods out and to get people around your economy. But the one question I'm always asked by investors is, have you got the skills that we need in order for us to be successful in Wales. And of course, increasingly, the answer to that is yes. We will continue to invest not just in schools, but in skills across the board for those of all ages, through, for example, our 100,000 places that we'll create for all ages in apprenticeship schemes.
Cwestiwn 10, Adam Price.
A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad am gefnogaeth Llywodraeth Cymru I ardd Fotaneg Cymru?
Wel, mae ysgrifennydd y Cabinet dros yr economi a seilwaith wrth i'n ystyried canfyddiadau'r grŵp gorchwyl a gorffen ar y mater hwn. Bydd yn cyfarfod â chydeirydd a phrif swyddog gweithredol yr ardd tua diwedd o'r wythnos I drafod y canfyddiadau.
Mae'r ardd wedi cyflwyno cais I gronfa treftadaeth y lotri I greu gerddi ragliwiaeth Regency Garden ar y safle. Mae'n debyg bod y cais wedi bod yn llwyddiannus a hefyd wedi denu posibiliadau o gyfraniadau preifat ar ben hynny, ond bod hyn yn ôl y gronfa yn amodol ar gadarnhad gan Llywodraeth Cymru o gefnogaeth y Llywodraeth i'r ardd. Gan bod ni'n sôn am filiynau o fuddsoddiad posib I Sir Gar, allwn ni disgwyl cymeryd yn gynnytaol y bydd y cadarnhad yn dod o di y Llywodraeth.
Wel, bydd yr ardd yn cael 581 mil o bunnoedd o refeniw y flwyddyn hyn a 90,000 o arian cyfalaf. Wrth gweud hynny, mae fe'n bwysig bod yr ardd yn dal I ystyried ffyrdd I godi ar mewn ffordd masnachol. Mae'n wedi bod yn broblem ers i'r ardd I agor, lle dyw'r ardd ddim wedi gallu codi digon o arian ynglyn â'r gweithredu maen nhw'n neud yna, a'r gweithgareddau sydd ar gael. Ond, ni'n gweithio gyda'r ardd er mwyn sicrhau bod yna ddyfodol cynaliadwy i'r ardd ag ystyried, wrth gwrs, pob ffordd o ariannu'r ardd yn y dyfodol.
Diolch i'r Prif Weinidog. Yr eitem nesaf yw'r cwestiwn brys.